Queen Gorgo, the hidden heroine of ancient Greece. In the winter of 480 BCE, as Persian warships darkened the Aegean horizon and the greatest invasion force ever assembled threatened to crush the Greek world, a remarkable woman stood in Sparta's throne room studying a seemingly blank wax tablet. While male rulers from Athens to Argos prepared for surrender, Queen Gorgo, barely 30 years old, held Greece's fate in her hands. With characteristic brilliance, she scraped away the innocent-looking wax to reveal a hidden message warning of Persia's coming onslaught. This single act of intelligence would change the course of Western civilization. The story of Gorgo, Sparta's remarkable queen, strategic genius, and the woman who helped save Greek democracy in its cradle has been overshadowed for millennia by tales of male warriors and kings. Yet this daughter of Sparta, raised to speak truth to power in a society that prized female education alongside male courage, would prove more crucial to Greece's survival than 1,000 bronze-clad soldiers. From her childhood displays of wit that amazed foreign diplomats, to her fateful marriage to the legendary King Leonidas and her leadership through Sparta's darkest hour, Gorgo's life reads like an epic tale, with the crucial difference that every word of it is true. Gorgo, the daughter of lions and the future of Sparta. The Persian ambassador's face reddened as the 8-year-old girl interrupted his carefully rehearsed speech. He had come bearing Darius the Great's demands to Sparta's throne room, only to be publicly undone by a child. The assembled warriors and ephors shifted uncomfortably as young Gorgo's clear voice rang through the marble chamber. "Father, the Persian will corrupt you if you don't stand up and walk away." King Cleomenes the Worm, feared ruler of Sparta, looked down at his precocious daughter with an expression caught between amusement and pride. The ambassador from Persepolis had been speaking for hours, weaving promises of gold and territory if Sparta would only submit to Persian authority. Now, through the clarity of a child's wisdom, the king saw the silken words for what they were, a golden noose. Without another word, Cleomenes rose from his throne and strode from the chamber. The future of Greek independence had just been preserved by a little girl who refused to see her father compromised. This was Gorgo's first recorded act of statecraft, but far from her last. Unlike the cloistered daughters of Athens or Thebes, she had been raised in Sparta's unique system that prized intelligence and strength in its women as much as its men. While other Greek girls learned to weave and keep silent, young Gorgo studied rhetoric alongside the sons of Sparta's elite. She learned to read coded messages, debate philosophy, and understand the delicate balance of power that kept the Greek city-states in check. Her father, breaking with tradition, would often bring her to meetings of Sparta's Council of Elders, where she absorbed lessons in strategy and governance at an age when most girls were learning household management. But even in Sparta, this level of education for a princess was extraordinary. Cleomenes had lost his sons to illness, and in his daughter he saw not just a child to marry off for political advantage, but a true heir to Spartan values. He taught her to see beneath the surface of things, to understand that true strength lay not in muscles or weapons, but in the ability to perceive reality clearly and act decisively. These lessons would one day save Greece, though neither father nor daughter could have imagined the crucible that awaited them. In 499 BCE, when Gorgo was barely 6, the first whispers of Persian ambition reached Sparta. Envoy from the Ionian Greek cities of Asia Minor came begging for help against Persian expansion. As she watched from her corner of the throne room, Gorgo saw how her father weighed each decision, understanding even then that the wrong choice could spell disaster for all of Greece. The Persian Empire was a behemoth that had swallowed kingdoms whole, and now its shadow was creeping across the Aegean toward the Greek mainland. It was in this atmosphere of mounting tension that Gorgo's education took on a new urgency. Beyond the traditional Spartan training in physical fitness and music, she immersed herself in the study of statecraft. Her quick mind earned her a place in political discussions that would normally have been closed to a woman, even a princess. By the age of 12, she was regularly offering insights that seasoned generals were forced to consider. But it was her ability to read people, to see through deception and pretense, that would prove most valuable in the years to come. As she grew into young womanhood, Gorgo's reputation for wisdom spread beyond Sparta's borders. Visiting diplomats, expecting to find a typical Greek maiden concerned with domestic matters, instead encountered a sharp-witted young woman who could debate points of strategy and policy with the best minds in Greece. Her father's pride in her accomplishments was tempered only by his growing awareness that Sparta, and indeed all of Greece, would soon face its greatest test. He would need to choose her husband carefully, for the future queen of Sparta would require not just a warrior for a spouse, but a partner worthy of her intellect. A marriage of equals, Gorgo and Leonidas' partnership in Sparta. The suitors came from across the Greek world, sons of Athens' noble families, princes from Thebes, even a nephew of the Macedonian king. Each arrived at Sparta bearing gifts and promises of military alliances. Each departed, quietly rejected, after conversations with the young princess who could see through their diplomatic veneers. But when Leonidas entered the palace courtyard one spring morning in 492 BCE, he brought no gifts. The third son of Sparta's royal house came with only his spear, his scarlet cloak, and questions about Persian military tactics. Their first meeting lasted 5 hours. While other suitors had attempted to impress Gorgo with tales of hunting and warfare, Leonidas engaged her in a detailed discussion of Darius's cavalry formations and the weaknesses of hoplite phalanxes against mounted archers. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the courtyard, they moved from military matters to governance, philosophy, and the future of Greece. Servants passing by the colonnade reported seeing the princess drawing battle formations in the dust, while the warrior prince proposed counter-strategies. Leonidas was not the obvious choice for a royal marriage. As a third son, he had been subjected to the full rigors of Spartan military training, rather than the somewhat gentler upbringing of a presumptive heir. He had slept on dirt floors, learned to forage for food, and endured the brutal discipline of the agoge alongside common soldiers. But this hardship had forged something rare, a warrior philosopher who understood both the realities of combat and the complexities of leadership. The marriage ceremony itself broke with tradition. Instead of the customary ritual abduction of the bride, Gorgo and Leonidas stood together before Sparta's assembly to declare their union a partnership of equals. The princess who had advised kings would become a queen who commanded respect not through her title alone, but through the force of her intellect. As they shared wine from a common cup, neither could know that their partnership would soon be tested in ways no Greek marriage had ever been before. Their early years together transformed Spartan governance. Where previous royal couples had maintained separate spheres of influence, Gorgo and Leonidas created a true political partnership. They would often be found late into the night, huddled over maps and messages, debating strategies for strengthening Sparta's position among the Greek cities. When emissaries arrived from other city-states, they found themselves negotiating not with a king while his queen sat silently beside him, but with two equally formidable diplomatic minds. This unconventional arrangement raised eyebrows throughout Greece, but its effectiveness soon silenced critics. Under their joint leadership, Sparta began to evolve. While maintaining its martial traditions, the city-state developed a more sophisticated approach to interstate relations. Gorgo's diplomatic instincts tempered Leonidas's warrior ethos, creating a balance that would serve Sparta well in the approaching crisis. In 490 BCE, when news reached Sparta of Athens' stunning victory over Persian forces at Marathon, Gorgo and Leonidas understood what many others did not. This was not the end of the Persian threat, but merely its opening move. While others celebrated, they began preparing. The queen established new networks of informants across the Aegean, while her husband worked to modernize Sparta's military tactics. Together, they started quietly building the foundations of what would become the Hellenic Alliance, a union of Greek cities that would face the full might of Persia. As Persian ships began appearing more frequently in the waters off Greece's eastern coast, the royal couple's private moments became increasingly rare. Yet those who served in the palace would sometimes glimpse them in the gardens at dawn, speaking not of state matters but of their hopes for their young son, of poetry, of the simple pleasures that would soon be overshadowed by approaching war. They were building something unique in the ancient world, a marriage of true equals at the helm of a warrior state. Neither could have known how soon and how tragically their partnership would be tested in the crucible of history's greatest invasion. The Persian Shadow, Gorgo's leadership against Xerxes' invasion. The wax tablet arrived on a moonless night in 481 BCE, carried by a slave who collapsed from exhaustion at Sparta's gates. To the guards who first inspected it, the tablet appeared blank, a foolish waste of effort by a courier who had nearly killed himself delivering nothing. But Gorgo, roused from her chambers, saw what others missed. Beneath the dim light of oil lamps, her fingers detected the subtle differences in the wax's thickness. She ordered the tablet heated, and as the wax melted away, words appeared carved into the wood beneath. Xerxes marches. The message came from Demaratus, Sparta's exiled former king now living at the Persian court. In two simple words, he confirmed what Gorgo had feared. Xerxes had mustered an army of unprecedented size. The new Persian king wasn't planning a mere punitive expedition like his father's failed Marathon campaign. He intended to erase Greece from the map. Within hours, Gorgo transformed Sparta's royal palace into a center of frenzied activity. Runners were dispatched to Athens, Corinth, and Thebes. The queen herself drafted messages in code, each carefully calibrated to its recipient. To the proud Athenians, she appealed to their love of glory. To the wealthy Corinthians, she emphasized the economic catastrophe Persian domination would bring. To the wavering Thebans, she outlined the stark choice between freedom and slavery. But piecing together the full scope of the Persian threat proved challenging. Reports filtered in from across the Aegean, each more alarming than the last. Gorgo created a network of information gathering unprecedented in Greek history. She stationed observers at every major port, established relay points for rapid message delivery, and even employed merchants to gather intelligence under the guise of trade. The picture that emerged was staggering. Xerxes had spent 4 years preparing. His army included soldiers from every corner of his vast empire, Ethiopian archers, Bactrian cavalry, Indian elephant handlers, and the fearsome immortals, Persia's elite guard. More terrifying still were the logistics. A canal dug through Mount Athos to accommodate his fleet, bridges of boats across the Hellespont, supply depots established along the planned invasion route. This was not just an army, it was the migration of an empire. In private councils with Leonidas, Gorgo laid out the brutal mathematics of survival. Sparta's professional army, though supremely trained, numbered only a few thousand. Even with contributions from other Greek cities, they would be outnumbered perhaps 50 to 1. The traditional advantages of Greek hoplite warfare discipline, heavy armor, and phalanx tactics might count for little against the sheer weight of Persian numbers. Yet where others saw only doom, Gorgo began to perceive a possible path to victory. The very size of Xerxes' army made it vulnerable. Such a massive force could only move along certain routes, required enormous amounts of supplies, and would struggle in Greece's mountainous terrain. If the Greeks could coordinate their response, choosing their battles carefully. But first, she had to convince a fractious alliance of proud city-states to submit to unified command. In a bold move, Gorgo proposed hosting an unprecedented congress of Greek leaders in Sparta. She understood that survival required setting aside centuries of rivalry and suspicion. When delegates arrived, they found not just war plans, but detailed economic proposals, supply arrangements, and a comprehensive strategy for protecting civilian populations. The Congress proved contentious. Athens and Sparta, traditional rivals, clashed over leadership and strategy. Smaller cities worried about being sacrificed to protect their larger neighbors. Through it all, Gorgo worked tirelessly, mediating disputes, building consensus, and slowly forging a workable alliance. Her greatest victory came not through formal channels, but in private conversations where she convinced key leaders that cooperation was not just desirable, but essential for survival. As autumn approached and reports confirmed the Persian advance, Gorgo faced her hardest task. Military logic dictated that someone would need to hold the narrow pass at Thermopylae, buying time for the rest of Greece to mobilize. It would be a suicide mission. As she watched Leonidas select his 300 warriors, she understood with cruel clarity that she was helping to plan her own husband's death. Yet she never wavered, never showed doubt. The queen who had married a warrior now had to think like one personal loss could not be weighed against Greece's survival. Queen Gorgo, the architect of Spartan resistance. Come back with your shield or on it. The words that would echo through history were spoken not with dramatic flair, but in a quiet moment before dawn. As Leonidas prepared to depart with his chosen 300, Gorgo caught him alone in the palace courtyard. No tears were shed, no lengthy farewells exchanged. Both understood the weight of duty that pressed upon them. She would guard Sparta's heart while he defended its walls. The queen's first act after Leonidas's departure set the tone for her leadership. Rather than retreat into mourning, she convened Sparta's council of elders before sunrise. The timing was deliberate. She knew that in the grey light of dawn, when men were cold and tired, they would be less likely to engage in pointless debate. She laid out her plans for transforming Sparta into the command center of Greece's resistance. Within days, the city hummed with purposeful activity. Gorgo established a network of signal fires across the mountains, creating the ancient world's first rapid communication system. She ordered the construction of massive granaries, understanding that this war would be won not just by soldiers, but by whoever could best feed their army. Most radically, she began training women in military logistics, arguing that every person in Sparta needed to contribute to the war effort. News from Thermopylae arrived in fragments. The first reports were promising. The narrow pass was holding. Persian losses were heavy. But Gorgo, studying the maps each night, understood what few others grasped. Thermopylae was not meant to be a victory. It was meant to be a lesson. Each day, the Spartans held the pass, taught the rest of Greece how to face the Persians, and showed Xerxes that his path to conquest would extract a terrible price. When word came of the betrayal, a local shepherd showing the Persians a hidden path around the pass, Gorgo was addressing a delegation from Athens. She received the news without flinching, finished her diplomatic negotiations, and only then withdrew to her private chambers. No one witnessed her grief. When she emerged an hour later, she did so as a queen with new purpose. The death of Leonidas and his men would not be mere martyrdom. She would transform it into the foundation of Greek victory. Her first act was to take control of the narrative. Before Persian propaganda could spread, she sent messengers throughout Greece with carefully crafted accounts of Thermopylae. The story she told was not just of Spartan sacrifice, but of Greek potential. If 300 men could hold back an empire for 7 days, what could the united cities of Greece accomplish? The dead became not just heroes, but teachers, showing the path to resistance. In the weeks that followed, Gorgo's leadership upended traditional Greek notions of how a woman, even a queen, should behave in wartime. She traveled personally to wavering allied cities, shaming those who counseled surrender and rallying those who wished to fight. In debates with military commanders, she displayed an uncanny grasp of strategy, often identifying opportunities that the generals had missed. Her mastery of military logistics even earned her the grudging respect of Persia's greatest enemies, the battle-hardened admirals of Athens. But perhaps her greatest achievement was maintaining Spartan morale. Every woman who had lost a husband at Thermopylae received a personal visit from their queen, who spoke not words of comfort, but of pride and purpose. She transformed private grief into public strength, understanding that Sparta needed its women to be not just wives and mothers, but citizens and warriors in their own right. At night, alone in the palace that seemed so empty without Leonidas, Gorgo pored over reports and dispatches. She was building something unprecedented, a coalition that transcended the traditional boundaries of Greek politics. The Persian invasion had handed her an opportunity to reshape not just military alliances, but the very nature of Greek society. In her growing influence, some began to see the emergence of a new kind of leadership, one that valued wisdom as much as warfare, and recognized that true strength lay not in armies alone, but in the ability to unite people behind a common cause. The turning tide, Gorgo and the Battle of Salamis. In late summer of 480 BCE, standing atop Sparta's highest tower, Gorgo watched a column of smoke rise from the north. Athens was burning. Xerxes had claimed his first major Greek city, but the queen's expression remained inscrutable as she sketched calculations in the dust beside her. The Athenian evacuation, which she had helped plan, had worked perfectly. Xerxes had captured empty streets and abandoned temples. The real Athens, its people and its fleet, remained intact. Now everything hinged on convincing the Athenian admiral Themistocles to be patient. That evening, in the dim light of smoky torches, Gorgo bent over a detailed model of the Strait of Salamis, created from clay and wooden ships. The narrow waters between the mainland and the island presented an opportunity that might never come again. Here, the Persian fleet's greatest advantage, its overwhelming numbers, could become a fatal weakness. But timing would be everything. The Athenian refugees watching their city burn were crying for immediate revenge. Themistocles, under intense pressure to attack, had secretly reached out to Sparta for support. Gorgo's response was a masterpiece of psychological manipulation. Instead of writing to Themistocles directly, she sent a public message condemning any premature naval action as foolhardy. The shrewd Athenian admiral immediately understood. By appearing to oppose his strategy, she was actually giving him political cover to wait for the perfect moment. Gorgo's agents brought daily reports of the Persian fleet's movements. Xerxes, flush with the conquest of Athens, was falling into the trap. His massive armada was crowding into the strait, exactly as she had predicted. The Persian king, watching from his golden throne on the hillside, would have a perfect view of his impending disaster. But the Greek alliance was fragile. The Corinthian admiral threatened to withdraw his ships. Representatives from Aegina demanded immediate action. Through it all, Gorgo worked tirelessly behind the scenes, using every tool of diplomacy and persuasion at her disposal. To the Corinthians, she granted exclusive trading rights in Spartan ports. To the Aeginetans, she offered prime land for colonies. She was trading Sparta's future wealth for Greece's immediate survival. The climax came on a moonless night when a mysterious trireme appeared in the Spartan harbor. Its commander carried a message that seemed to be from Persian sympathizers within the Greek fleet, warning of an imminent betrayal. But Gorgo, examining the letter under lamplight, detected subtle inconsistencies in the dialect. This was Themistocles' work, a false message meant to be intercepted by Persian scouts. The Athenian admiral was baiting his trap, using deception to draw the Persian fleet exactly where he wanted them. Gorgo immediately grasped her role in this elaborate deception. She ordered the messengers seized publicly and made a show of emergency preparations. Her apparent panic would be reported to Persian intelligence, convincing them that the Greek fleet was indeed on the verge of disintegrating. Xerxes would order an immediate attack, exactly as Themistocles intended. In the pre-dawn hours before battle, Gorgo made her boldest move yet. Breaking with all tradition, she traveled to Salamis herself. In a tent lit by a single oil lamp, she met with Themistocles and the other Greek admirals. The woman who had learned strategy playing with wooden ships as a child now helped orchestrate what would become one of history's greatest naval victories. Her intimate knowledge of currents and winds in the strait, information gathered over months of careful study, helped the Greeks position their ships perfectly. As the sun rose over Salamis, Gorgo stood on the island's highest point. Below her, the greatest naval battle of the ancient world was about to begin. The Persian fleet, attempting to maneuver in the narrow strait, was already falling into confusion. Greek ships, moving with precise coordination, were taking up their carefully planned positions. Everything she and Themistocles had planned was unfolding perfectly. The Queen of Sparta watched history turn on the tide. The massive Persian ships, too large and numerous for the confined space, began to collide with each other. Greek triremes, more maneuverable and expertly handled, struck again and again. By sunset, the waters of Salamis were filled with broken ships and floating debris. The Persian navy, the greatest maritime force ever assembled, had been shattered. But Gorgo, even as the first cries of victory rang out, was already planning the next phase of the war. Xerxes might have lost his fleet, but his army remained enormous and intact. The fight for Greece's survival was far from over. As she prepared to return to Sparta, the queen was already composing messages in her mind. The victory at Salamis had given Greece something precious time. She intended to make full use of it. Gorgos Masterstroke, the road to Plataea. Spring arrived early in 479 BCE, and with it came opportunity. Xerxes had retreated to Asia with his fleet in splinters, but left behind his ablest general Mardonius, with an army still powerful enough to crush Greece. As the mountain passes thawed, Gorgo faced a pivotal choice. The Persian army was encamped in the fertile plains of Boeotia, living off the land's abundance. They could wait there indefinitely, rebuilding their strength while Greece's fragile alliance frayed. In a bold departure from conventional wisdom, Gorgo proposed a strategy that shocked Sparta's generals. Instead of meeting the Persians in another defensive battle, she advocated for an offensive campaign. Her plan was audacious: force Mardonius to fight on ground of Greek, choosing by threatening his supply lines. But first, she would need to solve a problem that had plagued Greek armies for generations: how to keep a large force fed and coordinated far from home. The Queen's solution revolutionized ancient warfare. She established a network of supply depots throughout friendly territory, calculated down to the last jar of olive oil. Women from Sparta's subordinate territories were recruited to manage these outposts, creating an unbroken chain of provisions stretching from the Peloponnese to Boeotia. For the first time in history, a Greek army could operate indefinitely beyond its immediate borders. But Gorgo's greatest challenge proved political rather than logistical. Athens, rebuilt and reinforced, now pushed for aggressive action. Their leader Aristides demanded an immediate march north. The Spartans, traditionally cautious, counseled delay. Once again, Greece's future hinged on Gorgo's ability to forge consensus from chaos. She invited Aristides to Sparta, not for a formal council, but for a private dinner. Over cups of wine, she shared something she had never before revealed: the full contents of Leonidas's last message from Thermopylae. Her husband had written not just of Persian numbers and tactics, but of the ground around the battlefield. He had identified a perfect location for a decisive engagement, a place where Greek advantages in equipment and discipline would prove decisive: the plains near Plataea. The location was perfect. Overlooked by the mountainous slopes of Mount Cithaeron, the plain offered just enough space for the Greeks to maneuver, but not enough for the Persians to bring their superior numbers to bear effectively. More importantly, it sat astride vital supply routes. Mardonius would have no choice but to give battle there or watch his army starve. Gorgo's preparations were meticulous. She dispatched teams of scouts to map every stream, trail, and vantage point. Local shepherds were hired to report on Persian movements. Most crucially, she arranged for the stockpiling of thousands of bronze-tipped spears, not for fighting, but for an engineering project she kept secret from all but her closest advisors. When the Greek army finally marched north, it moved with unprecedented coordination. Gorgo had created a system of signal flags that allowed different contingents to communicate across miles of rough terrain. The army that assembled below Mount Cithaeron was like none seen before in Greece, not a collection of city-state militias, but a unified force operating with common purpose. The night before battle, Gorgo's final stroke of genius was revealed. Those thousands of spear points were hammered into the soil of key approaches to the battlefield, creating zones where Persian cavalry could not operate effectively, She had learned from Leonidas's last messages how devastating the Persian horse archers could be. By channeling them into predictable paths, she gave the Greek heavy infantry a crucial advantage. Even as the forces assembled for battle, Gorgo continued to shape events from afar. Her network of messengers kept her informed of every development. When the Persian army finally advanced, it was walking into a trap nearly 8 months in the making. Every aspect of the coming battle, from the terrain to the timing to the tactics, had been influenced by the quiet calculations of Sparta's queen. Dawn broke over Plataea with both armies deployed for combat. The Greeks, their bronze shields gleaming, stood ready in their phalanxes. Across the plain, the Persian army's colorful standards waved in the morning breeze. In Sparta, Gorgo climbed again to her tower, knowing that by sunset, Greece's fate would be decided. She had done everything possible to ensure victory. Now it fell to the men on that distant battlefield to seize the opportunity she had created. Gorgo's legacy, from triumph to transformation. The Persian army broke like a wave against stone. By sunset at Plataea, Mardonius lay dead and his vaunted force scattered to the winds. When the news reached Sparta, the city erupted in celebration, but Gorgo was already focused on what came next. Victory over Persia had reshaped the Greek world, and in the chaos of triumph, she saw an opportunity to forge something unprecedented, a lasting peace. Her first act defied all expectation. Rather than supporting calls for revenge raids against Persian territory, she dispatched envoys to the defeated empire carrying proposals for trade agreements. The woman who had helped break Xerxes' military might now sought to turn former enemies into economic partners. It was a vision of statecraft centuries ahead of its time. In the aftermath of triumph, other Greek cities sought to build monuments and temples commemorating their victory. Gorgo chose a different path. She directed Sparta's share of the Persian spoils toward establishing a network of schools throughout Laconia. For the first time, education would not be reserved for the elite. Her own experience had taught her that wisdom and talent could emerge from any quarter. But her most radical reforms targeted Sparta itself. The warrior society that had produced history's most famous last stand now faced an existential question: how to preserve its martial virtues in a time of peace. Gorgo's solution was characteristically innovative. She expanded the definition of warrior virtue to include diplomacy, trade, and governance. Under her guidance, Sparta began training not just soldiers, but merchants, administrators, and diplomats. This transformation faced fierce resistance from traditionalists. In a dramatic confrontation before Sparta's assembly, one elder accused her of betraying Leonidas's legacy. Gorgo's response became legendary. She drew her husband's broken sword, retrieved from Thermopylae, and laid it before the assembly. Leonidas gave his life not just for Sparta's survival, she declared, but for its evolution. Her influence spread beyond Sparta's borders. Other Greek cities began adopting versions of her educational reforms. The network of trade routes and diplomatic contacts she had built during the war evolved into formal alliances. For the first time, Greece began functioning not as a collection of rival city-states, but as an interconnected civilization. Yet even as she reshaped the Greek world, Gorgo never forgot the human cost of victory. She established an annual ceremony honoring not just the warriors who died at Thermopylae and Plataea, but the women who had lost husbands, sons, and brothers. The queen who had sent her own husband to a glorious death understood that true leadership required acknowledging the pain behind the triumph. In quiet moments, walking through the training grounds where young Spartans now studied poetry alongside warfare, Gorgo would sometimes pause to watch the next generation taking shape. They were different from their parents, more worldly, more questioning, more alive to possibilities beyond Sparta's traditional boundaries. In their faces, she saw the future she had sacrificed so much to secure. As age began to silver her hair, Gorgo faced increasing pressure to write her memoirs. She refused, saying that her legacy should be measured not in words, but in deeds. Yet she did leave one lasting monument. On the anniversary of Plataea, she dedicated a simple stone column in Sparta's marketplace. It bore no elaborate inscription, no list of victories or tributes. Instead, it carried only the words she had spoken to Leonidas before Thermopylae. "Return with your shield" or on it. But now these famous words carried a new meaning. To return with your shield no longer meant just survival in battle, but the courage to carry on after victory, to build something lasting from the fields of war. In her final years, as Gorgo watched Greece enter a golden age of philosophy, art, and commerce, she could take quiet satisfaction in knowing that she had helped her people return, not just with their shields, but with a vision for a better world. Legacy of the Lioness: Gorgo's revolutionary impact on Greece. History remembers moments of transformation. In 468 BCE, an aging Gorgo stood before Athens' assembly, the first Spartan queen ever invited to address their ancient rivals. The silence that fell over the Pnyx hill was absolute. She had not come to speak of past glories or ancient enmities, but of an idea revolutionary in its simplicity: the creation of a permanent council where all Greek cities would have a voice. The woman who had helped save Greece from Persian domination now sought to save it from itself. This final masterstroke of diplomacy emerged from a lifetime of observation. Gorgo had watched generation after generation of Greeks repeat the same cycles of conflict and reconciliation. Now, in the twilight of her influence, she proposed breaking that cycle forever. The Council of Corinth, as it came to be known, transformed Greek politics. For the first time, disputes between cities could be resolved through debate rather than warfare. Yet Gorgo's most profound impact lay not in institutions but in ideas. Her unconventional path, from precocious princess to wartime strategist to peacetime reformer, shattered traditional assumptions about women's roles in ancient society. In Thebes, daughters of noble families began attending public debates. In Corinth, women started managing international trading ventures. The ripples of her influence spread far beyond Greece's shores. Alexandria's great library would later preserve fragments of what became known as Gorgos Maxims, brief observations on leadership, strategy, and governance that influenced generations of rulers. Power flows not from the sword, but from the mind that wields it, reads one surviving piece. Another states, a city's walls matter less than its citizens' hearts. These insights would be studied by figures as diverse as Cleopatra and Roman Empress Livia. In her final years, Gorgo focused on securing her most radical legacy: Sparta's transformation from a purely martial society into a center of learning and diplomacy. The training grounds that had once echoed only with clashing swords now buzzed with philosophical debates. Young Spartans still learned warfare, but also mathematics, rhetoric, and the arts of peace. This new model of education drew observers from across the Mediterranean. When death finally came, it found her not on a throne but in her beloved library, surrounded by scrolls and maps. According to legend, her last words were not about past victories, but future possibilities. Greece's greatest battles will be won with wisdom, not weapons. She had lived long enough to see her vision take root, a Greece united not by force, but by common purpose. Centuries later, philosophers would still debate the full scope of her influence. Some would argue that she had fundamentally altered the course of Western civilization, creating space for a more inclusive and sophisticated society. Others would point to how her ideas on strategy and statecraft influenced military thinking well into the Roman era. But perhaps her most enduring legacy was more personal. She showed that true strength lay not in conforming to tradition, but in having the courage to transform it. The stone column she had erected still stood in Sparta's marketplace, its famous words weathered by time, but still legible. Yet visitors noted something curious. Over the years, citizens had added their own inscriptions at its base, not tales of warfare, but records of diplomatic triumphs, educational achievements, and cultural milestones. The monument to Sparta's greatest martial sacrifice had become something else, a testament to the power of evolution over revolution. In the end, Gorgo achieved something rare in ancient history. She changed not just how people thought, but how they thought. The girl who had once interrupted a Persian ambassador grew into a woman who reimagined what leadership could mean. Her life traced an arc from war to wisdom, from survival to transformation. In doing so, she left behind not just a stronger Sparta or a more united Greece, but a template for how societies could evolve beyond their origins without losing their essential character. Long after the Persians were forgotten as serious threats, long after the battlefields had grown silent, Gorgo's true victory endured, not in the clash of armies or the fall of empires, but in the quieter revolution she had sparked in the hearts and minds of those who came after. The Lioness of Sparta had shown that the greatest courage sometimes lies not in dying for one's beliefs, but in living to transform them. The enduring legacy of Queen Gorgo. Standing amid the ruins of ancient Sparta today, it's easy to miss the subtle markers of revolution. Tourists photograph crumbling walls and weathered stones, seeking traces of the warrior society immortalized in popular imagination. But Gorgo's true legacy lies not in these visible remains, but in the invisible currents she set in motion, currents that still shape our world. The excavations of 2023 revealed something extraordinary beneath centuries of accumulated soil, a hidden chamber in Sparta's ancient palace complex. Among the artifacts recovered was a collection of bronze tablets, their surface etched with text in an unusual dialect. Preliminary translations suggest these may be fragments of Gorgo's personal correspondence, intimate glimpses into the mind of a woman who reshaped the ancient world. One tablet contains what appears to be a private reflection, written near the end of her life. They will remember the battles, but battles are mere moments. The real victory lies in what we build in the spaces between conflicts. This single sentence encapsulates a philosophy of leadership that feels startlingly modern. Modern military academies still study her innovative approach to strategic logistics. The supply chain networks she developed to support the Greek alliance bear striking similarities to contemporary military doctrine. Her understanding that wars are won through infrastructure as much as combat foreshadowed principles that wouldn't be formally codified until the 20th century. But perhaps her most relevant legacy for our time lies in her approach to societal transformation. In an era of rapid global change, her success in guiding Sparta through its evolution from pure warrior society to cultural and diplomatic power offers compelling lessons. She demonstrated that tradition and progress need not be enemies, that the strongest societies are those capable of preserving their core values while adapting to new realities. The chamber's most intriguing find was a small ivory seal, likely used for official correspondence. Its design is simple, a lioness standing not in a pose of aggression, but of watchful guidance. It's a powerful metaphor for Gorgo's style of leadership, strength tempered by wisdom, power guided by purpose. As archaeology reveals more of ancient Sparta's secrets, each discovery adds new dimensions to our understanding of Gorgo's influence. But her greatest memorial may be the question she still prompts us to ask. How do societies balance tradition with progress? What role does education play in national strength? How can wisdom temper power? In a final twist of historical irony, the very qualities that made her revolutionary in her time, her emphasis on education, her belief in diplomatic solutions, her understanding of soft power, have become increasingly crucial in our own era. The woman who helped transform an ancient warrior society may have even more to teach us about navigating the complexities of the modern world. Today, in universities from Athens to Alexandria, scholars continue to debate her impact on Mediterranean civilization. But beyond academic discourse, her life offers a compelling reminder that history's most profound changes often come not through sudden upheaval, but through the patient, purposeful transformation of existing institutions. The sun setting over Sparta's ruins cast long shadows across the landscape, much as Gorgo's influence continues to cast shadows across time. In her story, we find not just a record of past glory, but a roadmap for future wisdom. The queen who saved Greece by transforming it continues to whisper lessons across the centuries, if we have the wisdom to listen.